A colloid just doesn't have just nitrogen on it, yeah? Same concept up here. So we got our two different kinds of colloids. Let's look at the root hair. Root hairs are always negatively charged. Well, that's not true. Most of the areas of a root hair are negatively charged. There are some positively charged spots. Okay. But for the most part, for argument's sake, let's say that the root hair exists without all these H's on it, right? A root grows down into the environment, grows out, and there's colloids floating about. What's all this in between? What's between the root hair and the colloid? When I say the word solution, what does that mean? Yes. What else? Water. Anything that has the word solution in it means it's made with water. Okay? So, if I say soil solution, this is the water in the soil. There is very little air in your soil. If it does exist, it exists on those colloid surfaces in tiny little bubbles. For the most part, the environment looks like this. Water, things floating around in the water, and a root hair sticking into water. That's essentially what it looks like if you put it under a microscope. That is because water has an amazing ability to bond with itself. If you take a drip of water on a table, put it next to another drip of water, eventually they come together, right? That's because it's covalent bonding. It has an amazing ability to bond with things. It gets super sticky to the point at a microscopic level. When we're talking down here, water is super sticky. Not in like the sticky sense, but it holds things together, yeah? So in here you got all this water, and you have all these minerals around this clay particle surface, and you have a root hair. Root hairs, one of the byproducts of metabolizing minerals, one of the byproducts of taking up nitrogen into the plant structure and using it, you got to have some kind of waste, right? When you eat food, you got to get rid of whatever waste there is. So it's essentially, when you take a pea, what is it made of? It's mostly nitrogen. Okay, that's why it has an ammonia smell if you let it sit out, right? So, lots of nitrogen comes out. Plants don't expel nitrogen, they expel hydrogen. Remember that carbohydrate equation I had up there? Well, after sugars are used, there's leftover hydrogen atoms. Just like there's leftover nitrogen when we eat, there's leftover hydrogen when a plant eats. And then what is it? It's got to get rid of that somehow. Well, plants can't pee, right? Or can they? They actually can out of their roots. That's how they expel their dirty whatnots, their doo-doos. So it comes right out the roots. What's the byproduct of their process? Hydrogen. What's the problem with this? Hydrogens are super light, right? They transfer pretty readily, and they take up a spot if there is one available. So, because most root hairs are going to be negatively charged, as the plant oozes out hydrogen, where does that hydrogen go? Right to the side of the root hair, and it sits there, waiting for something to knock it off, something that's heavier and has a bigger charge. So, every root hair, for the most part, as you know it, if there's no minerals around, is covered in hydrogen. This means that its pH is, we're talking about hydrogen and pH, it's percent hydrogen, there's a lot of hydrogen around here. The pH just around the root hair is going to be super low, very acidic. So you need to have something that's strong enough, magnesium 2+, to come along, knock off 2 of those hydrogens and just come on and bond to that plant. Plant takes it up through the roots. I'll talk about that in a second. Uses it, and then there's waste. Hydrogen, boom, goes right back there. So what happens when this Mg comes over knocks off those two, and then the plant takes it up. What happens? Well, it's probably exiting some more hydrogen in the same environment. So as soon as that gets taken up, boom, boom, 2 more hydrogens go right in its place. So then you have to have something that's stronger than a 1 plus to come along and knock it off. Is that a problem when we're talking about K, which is a 1 plus, and hydrogen that is a 1 plus? Not really, because K is much heavier. Remember, hydrogen is super light. Everything is heavier than H. So because it's heavier, it'll come in and knock off that hydrogen. But then it's taken right up again and then replaced with a hydrogen. This is the constant battle. These are why plants are your enemy when you're talking about nutrition. If I come along with calcium carbonate and I flood the whole environment with it, all that calcium comes through, it's water soluble, it comes in and just, like corn on the cob, just knocks all those hydrogens off, and then you got calcium that's bonded to it, and the pH is changed in the environment. 10 days later, what happens? Plant takes up that calcium, boom, throws a million little hydrogens back out there, and you're back to square one, right? Well, this area has changed pH. Plant root surfaces are almost always the same pH. No matter what you give it, it's just going to take it up and then put a hydrogen in the back in that spot. Okay? Now when we're talking about anions, this is a problem, right? Anions, negatively charged ions that are kind of floating inside the soil solution. Because of their charge, this is a negatively charged root here with a bunch of positives held on the outside. A negative and a negative, what happens? Nothing happens there, right? So that phosphorus that is a negatively charged anion needs to either A, find one of those very, very few spots that are on a root here that will pick up an anion, or that phosphorus needs to bond with another mineral in this environment to become an opposite charge. So then it can be taken up by plants. How does it do that? Usually microorganisms will grab onto that anion, consume it, excrete it. It's broken down, it bonds with something else floating along, and it's like a crapshoot. It's a lottery shoot. If it comes along and all of a sudden it grabs onto something, and then if it had a brain, it would hope that it turned into a negatively charged ion so it can be taken up by the plants. Does that make sense? Davey, am I losing you, bud? A little bit? You want to stand up? Okay. Boy, that's complicated, but not really, right? Once you have somebody explaining it to you. What types of soils have high and low CEC? Well, for example, a soil that has low cation exchange capacity is going to have low clay or organic matter. What is CEC again? What's the definition? That's what it means, but what is the definition? Something about negative charge of a colloid. Right, exactly. It's just the negative charge of a colloid. So, if it has low CEC, it means it has a low negative charge. Because clay materials and organic materials have a high negative charge, if it's low CEC, that means that you're missing clays and organic matter, essentially. It means it has a low water holding capacity, mainly because that means it doesn't have a lot of colloids. It hasn't eroded down to its minimalist level yet. Remember I said colloids hold water on their surface? Well, if you don't have a lot of colloids, you don't have a lot of water holding capacity. It requires more liming and fertilizers. Well, it has a low CEC, and plants can't take up nutrients that are not bonded with a colloid. So if you have low colloids, you have a limited number of colloids. As you put in, say, nitrogen fertilizer, that bonds with the colloid, and then it can be taken up by the plant. But if there's only a handful of those colloids, only a handful of nitrogen molecules can be taken up by the soil and available to plants. The rest of it just leaches down and away and out. If you have trillions and trillions and millions of colloids, then that nitrogen comes in, gets bonded, and it's held there. Subject to leaching. Remember, it goes down and out. You can have high productivity through management. Okay, some of the best soils I've ever farmed are on the windward side of Oahu. We're talking Waianae. We're talking dust. This is clay dust. Why is it some of the best stuff I've ever farmed? It's essentially 100% colloid. And it's mineral colloid with a little bit of organic. Now, if I go ahead and through management, and I go and I add a lot of organic material to that clay soil, a little bit of microorganisms maybe, I can improve the quality of it and increase the CEC just by adding organic matter. Also, if I add nutrients to the soil in high clay soils like in Waianae, there's a lot more colloid surface, that therefore the plants can exchange a lot better. Does that make sense? If I do nothing and I don't put any fertilizers, organic matter, it's the worst soil to farm in because it's got poor water drainage, it's got incredibly negative charge, and it could be possibly damaging to the plant and taking minerals out of the plant because of its incredibly high negative charge. But if I go and I add fertilizers and organic matter there, kind of even things out, fill in all the gaps, it can become some of the best fertilizers or soils out there available to you. Okay? Example for high CEC. If you have a high cation exchange capacity, highest I've ever recorded in Hawaii was in Waimanalo on Oahu. That, if you look at coal allows, it's just product of erosion for, what, 2 million years, 3 million years? I mean, literally, the cliffside has just eroded away to the point where you just have coal allows. So all that cliffside, all that mountain turned into what? It just turned into soil right there in Waimanalo. So high CEC means that there's high clay content, all that mountainside that broke down, and then you have high organic matter. Well, it's on the windward side of the island. Lots of life, lots of organic matter. Perfect combination to make a high CEC soil. It has high water holding capacity. Lots of colloids, lots of water can be held by the colloid surfaces. There's less need for liming and fertilizers, except for nitrogen. Basically because the organic material that is in there provides a lot of those nutrients for the plants. The pH is going to be more neutral. And you'll definitely have to add N because nitrogen leaches away, and that's just what happens, right? It can be difficult to cultivate these high CEC soils due to poor drainage, right? High water holding capacity can certainly be a bad thing. If you're talking about a crop like a root crop, we're talking about taro, well, that taro is so bad, but sweet potatoes or something, you don't want something that's, it's not going to like wet feet. It really, really likes to be up and dry. So if your soil's holding way too much water, that could be certainly a problem for pathogens and many other things. So you need to have that right drainage. And K fixation. I don't want to get too much into that, but what happens there is K is what charge? 1 plus, right? So what is hydrogen, right? 1 plus, right? Same as this, but this is heavier. Okay. So what happens is you have a a lot of hydrogen in that soil, but it's able to exchange readily. Along comes a bunch of K that you put in the soil. Boom. And it takes over the spot of that hydrogen. If we're not talking about a root surface, we're talking about just the colloid surface, then that K will sit on that soil until something comes along and knocks it off. That being said, if you're a farmer and you need to add K to your soil, most farmers in Hawaii have to add 3 to 8 times the amount that would be needed in a granite soil on the mainland, because the soil will actually grab onto that 1+ ion, just like it would a hydrogen, grab onto it, and it just waits for something to knock it off. So you actually could be putting pounds and pounds and pounds of K into your soil, and it's only just bonding with the soil surface, the colloid surface. It's not getting available to your plant. Not until that whole environment is so packed full with K that it's kind of just hanging out in the soil solution can it run into the plant. This is a problem, right? Why? Because in Hawaii, there's not very many K sources that are naturally available. Manures, sea kelp, fish meal, there's not too much available. So when we're talking about K-mag or something that's available organically, this is stuff that is mined from the ground. It's organic, but it's mined from the ground. It certainly doesn't fit within my criteria of an acceptable fertilizer. This is a problem, because even if I do have the mined stuff, 50-pound bags of it, sometimes I need 800 pounds of this stuff to put it out until the plants can actually access some. At $50 a bag, you're talking hugely expensive, and that there's no alternative but to do that, because we don't have any local sources of K that you can readily get on a regular basis. So this is a problem in Hawaii. So when you get your soil recommendation back, don't be scared, well, don't be surprised when they write back and say you need to put down 800 pounds of K-mag on your field per acre. I mean, that's just at $50 a bag. I mean, it's at $50 for a 50-pound bag. It's just so much money. $400 just to put K out on your land. And what happens in a month and a half? You got to do it again. You got to do it again. You got to do it again every month. So it's like you got to look at the requirements for your crop, and this is why crop selection is super important. Okay? Okay. Some methods how to fix high CEC is to lower your CEC by changing the pH, making it a little bit more acidic. So is this obvious that there's a happy medium between high and low CEC? There's that happy zone. And when you get your soils tested, they will help you find that happy zone. You guys want to take a break? I'm losing Davey like every 10 minutes, so I just want to make sure we get him up. Let's take a break. All lots, yeah.
So how is it that they're able to grow bananas when it's very little K?
Oh, when it's like it grows wild out there and stuff? Well, for plant development, it only needs nitrogen for the most part. It doesn't really need too much K to do its growing phase.
It's producing of the fruit.
It's producing the fruit. So if you compared that to like corn needs a huge amount of nitrogen to do its flower and its fruit phase, which is pretty rare. It's because it's a grass. And just like the bananas, it's just that certain phase that it needs, a lot more than the average plant. That's why when you do a tissue analysis on a banana, it's like really, really high in potassium. That's why it's so good for you. It's how you take the potassium. Well, that potassium doesn't come into play until it starts to fruit. So you can have bananas growing all over the place, wild like crazy, but you don't see them yielding a lot of fruit or any decent quality fruit. And when you do pull it off the wild stuff, it's super starchy, right? It's because there's a lot more sugars in it. Why is there a lot more sugars? Because it has a lot more surface area, it has a lot more photoreactive cells, but that's because it uses a lot of nitrogen and it doesn't have that P and the K.
So the K is the easiest way is to go chemical for it.
Well, no, you could do
Organic.
the organic, like the K-Mag and stuff. It's just super expensive, yeah. I mean, it's drilled out of the ground and then put into a bag. Therefore, it's not manufactured.
You sell the kelp meal, yeah?
Kelp meal's good. Super expensive. You want to do 5 acres of kelp meal? I mean, it's you're talking a couple $1,000, right? So it's like you really have to build a relationship with your wherever you're getting your minerals from. Look at the cost and your crop selection.
Couldn't you just use the banana compost as potassium?
If you're composting the fruit, but why would you compost your fruit? The peels, yeah, I mean it's certainly high, but the plant focuses most of that energy on to the banana meat itself. And you know, bananas originally had seeds, right? Like in Africa, they all have seeds. They got hard seeds in them.
It's hard to eat them.
And then when we started cultivating them, brought them out to the tropics. Actually, they wrapped around the globe, eventually ending up in Hawaii. By the time they got out here, they have no seeds. So the goal of the plant is to make a case for its seeds. So more sugars are better in the wild. So you're able to control the amount of sugars that are put into the fruit if you do it cultivated. But in the wild, it's just trying to get. It still thinks it's making seeds, so it's trying to give as much sugar as it can to those seeds as a nutrient source. So when you break apart a banana, you see those little specks. Those are the remnants of the seeds. It's actually only endocarp. It's just the layering on the outside. The seed actually doesn't exist. It's been bred out. So.
What about composting the rotten bananas?
Yeah,
To get K out of it.
certainly. But you got to remember that potassium and phosphorus, they leach out too. So it's like you got to be real careful on once it decomposes, does it go down into your soil, and then what are you left with? You're only left with organic matter. So are you able to make sure that P and that K stays? Well, you do that by stirring it. Lots and lots of stirring. So as the P and the K moves, I mean, it doesn't move a million miles an hour. It's just maybe a centimeter per day as it goes down. And then if you keep turning it once a week, it doesn't have a chance to get up and out. So that's how that's why you stir. One of the reasons why you stir. You want it to get to a high temperature. So maybe 3 to 6 days. You'll have a real high activity in the beginning, and then it'll start cooling down, and then at that point you could do like once every month, and then
Every 2 weeks to add the vegetables.
yeah, you really want to be careful. It's like the amount of carbon you're putting in and the amount of nitrogen you're putting into your compost pile dictates how efficient your compost pile is. So when we do the class, Zach will break all that down, where there has to be this happy medium of green and woody and organic material. It can't just be all of one kind and all that stuff. So if you're doing composting and all you're doing is composting the fruit, you don't have enough hard carbon in there. So you might want to do the exactly. Actually, more of a woody. So we're thinking lignin, wood chips, sawdust, anything that's super hard in nature. Yeah, like barks and mulches and all that stuff. So I use paper, shredded paper from my office. Man, shredded paper, like the offices get, like they have the big trash and they recycle them. I grab like 6 or 7 bags a week from HCC, and I use it as a mulch, and I use it as an inoculant for my to put carbon source in my compost bin, and I use it mostly as a mulch because it's sterile. There's no pathogens on it. It reflects the light when the sun is out. It keeps the bugs off. Bugs don't like going near bright things. So because my whole garden, I have almost a quarter acre, and it's gleaming bright white. If you fly over, it's just like, what the hell is that down there? And it also reflects the sunlight for the plants, so you can get a lot more sunlight underneath the plants. And I also use it because it breeds a lot of worms. Well, it's a food source for worms. So what it does is you put it out on the surface as a mulch. The worms come down from deep, and they come up closer to the surface, and they start eating the paper and breaking down the paper, and then they poop out. So they're pooping in that top layer, and that's all plant available. So all that nutrients that they're pooping out is right there at the roots, as opposed to going happening a foot down. So actually, it draws the worms up.
Oh, they loosen the dirt too, yeah.
And then as they do that, they loosen the dirt, aeration, all that good stuff. So it's my second favorite mulch. My first favorite mulch is the papery stuff that's on the outside of a coffee bean before they roast it. You know when they dry coffee, it's got that little paper parchment on the outside. It's like a husk, right? And then they throw it into a roaster in the tumbler, and then that takes that husk off, and then they roast. That stuff, you can get it from organic coffee growers out in Kona. You can get them out in Kau. And that is the best mulch you could possibly put out on your garden. It goes out like carpet. Super, super fine. And it's anti-pathogen. Pathogens, you can't exist on it. It's super hard in that there's a lot of carbon in it. It's super strong. Doesn't break down. I plant lettuce into it. So you know where lettuces usually have like splashing issues? Soil hits it and it starts dying off. Bugs get in there. I plant all of my lettuce out with that coffee parchment. And it's like planting in the carpet. And you can put them just right real close to each other, and there's no splashing or anything when you water, and it just makes my life so much easier. Yep. So talk to, if you know a coffee farmer, if you don't know one, call up an organic coffee farmer. Let them know that you're looking for that material. They'll let you come and pick it up for free. And then just put it on